When I was first divorced, I wasn't doing well, so I would just kind of come in the store, look really quick, and then disappear. But he kind of caught on to that and said, like, hey, do you want to, like, go for wings sometime? And got me into that group, and it was just awesome to have a place to talk about silly stuff. It was a pretty heavy time in my life, right? So to talk about stuff that didn't really matter, to talk about Star Wars or Batman or whatever, and to find guys that were like, oh, we all love this same stuff. So that's kind of where it all started, and there was conversations around the table like, oh, wouldn't it be fun to have a convention here someday? But you know what it's like, there's a lot of some days, right? Like, yeah, that'd be cool someday.
Welcome to episode 1 of YXE Underground, an original podcast focusing on people in Saskatoon who are making an impact in their communities but are flying under the radar. My name is Eric Anderson. This is the first episode of YXE Underground, and this podcast is something I've been working on for about a year now, so I really appreciate you listening. I should tell you a little bit about myself and why I created YXE Underground. So I grew up on the south side of Swift Current, Saskatchewan. I say south side because it makes me sound all tough, but really it was a pretty tranquil place to grow up. In my 20s, I taught high school in Frontier, Saskatchewan for about 2 years, but it just wasn't for me. So I went back to university to study journalism at the University of Regina, which led me to a nearly 8-year career working with CBC Radio. It was a great experience, and I especially loved working in radio. When I left CBC a few years ago to take a job at Sherbrooke Community Centre here in Saskatoon, I started thinking about doing a podcast, and it seemed to me that a podcast featuring interviews with people doing amazing things in Saskatoon, but for whatever reason aren't receiving a lot of public attention, would be kind of a cool thing to do. I also wanted to do something that might, in some small way, bring people and communities together through the sharing of people's stories. So, as I said off the top, thank you so much for listening, and we should probably get to the first interview right now. I first met Mike Fisher at Saskatoon's Roxy Theatre. It was about 3 years ago at a screening of Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. That's the one where the Enterprise goes back in time to find humpback whales in order to save 23rd century Earth. Oh man, it's such a great movie. You have to see it. And thank you again to my wife Jennifer for coming with me that night. That was very special. Mike was there with the Saskatchewan Entertainment Expo. He is one of the co-founders of this great event, which is a Comic-Con style weekend at Prairieland Park, and it brings Hollywood stars and artists from all around the world. The expo has grown in size since it started in 2013 and has really served to bring together fans of all things TV shows, science fiction, fantasy, art, comics, animation, and whatever else you want to throw in there. I wanted Mike on YXE Underground because he's worked incredibly hard to build this event into something that thousands of people in Saskatoon eagerly await for every year. Mike was kind enough to say yes. So in July, we met at Amazing Stories, a great Saskatoon comic book store, and sat down at one of the tables in the very back where people come to play board and magic games. Surrounded by comics, posters, and science fiction memorabilia, Mike and I talked about everything from the success and challenges of Expo to how Saskatoon's comic book community really pulled him through some tough times. So I hope you enjoy this interview.
Today we're at Amazing Stories, which is a comic store, and amazing, wow, I didn't mean to, it's an unbelievable comic store that's been around, I think, 18 or 19 years at this point. I've been coming here for about 12, and it was the birth of a lot of my interests because it was a place that I could come and find like-minded people, and the owners are great, and I always feel like I'm at home, so it's sort of my home base for this sort of stuff. So
I really wanted to chat with you on this podcast because I think you've done great things for this community and building a community here in Saskatoon. But I want to know, because I'm very curious, when did your love of all things comics, pop culture, movies, when and how did it start?
It all started when I was very young with Star Wars. So that was something that my brothers and I watched every Christmas, at least once a year. We'd watch the trilogy, but it was something that we always did together, which I loved. There wasn't much like that. They were very much into Star Trek as well, which was at the time was a little bit nerdy for me, just because I think it was a little bit slower to catch on to some of the philosophical stuff. But that's where it all started, and that's actually how I started coming to Amazing Stories. Was I'd look for some Star Wars stuff to add to my collection. It was pretty peripheral though until about 12 years ago when I started to sort of dig into the community more, when I started finding people that I had a lot in common with, and I realized there might be more there in terms of friendships and something interesting to become a part of.
So when you were younger, did you have a lot of friends, like say middle school, high school, that were interested in this kind of stuff? Because growing up in Swift Current for myself, I had few. I was a big Trekkie, and I had and some Star Wars, and I had nobody. So did you have people? Right,
and for you then there was no internet at that point, right?
No.
So you would have been alone in that fandom. Sometimes I think there's pros and cons to both. Sometimes the way fandom is now, I think it's better when there was no internet. But no, Star Wars was sort of where it began and ended. Anything else was a bit too nerdy. Like I played football and had the same friends from K to 8, and we just sort of did everything. But we didn't really sit around reading comics a ton. I did a little bit. And we all did a little bit, but it wasn't something that we immersed ourselves in. It was mostly playing with the Star Wars toys out in the sandbox. Of course, G.I. Joe was huge, He-Man, all those sorts of things. When my friend Donnie, who told me about this, it was actually Ronald Reagan that was responsible for all of those toys happening. I know you think, what's the connection, right? It's because up until him, it was illegal to have a show that advertised your own toys to kids. And so he passed legislation that made it legal. So that's when Hasbro was like, oh my goodness, Transformers, G.I. Joe, He-Man. Like, it was all just a reason to sell toys. But of course, our age, we just ate that up, right? So it was, that's sort of where it all boomed. And I think that's the golden age. And you can still see that stuff. It all just keeps looping around. So, but I could see how for you that would be tough just to be into it by yourself.
So I have Ronald Reagan to thank for my love of Optimus Prime and He-Man.
Yeah, isn't that weird? Like, it's a weird connection. If you just said that to somebody without explaining it, they think, what in the world are you talking about? But, sometimes I think there's good and bad, but I just loved those toys when I was a kid, right? Like, what we used to do with the G.I. Joes is we build huge sandcastles in the sandbox, place all of our G.I. Joes around in different spots, and then just put the hose at the bottom of and then it would slowly, erode, I guess, and then sort of the last G.I. Joe standing. I bet you there's probably 100 G.I. Joes in our backyard buried, because we could never find them all afterwards, right? They'd all be buried in sand. Back then too, they were hard won. Like, we didn't get them from our parents. It was cutting lawns or Christmas or birthdays. Every Christmas, my grandma would buy my brother and I a Star Wars vehicle, which is like huge, right? So it wasn't like we took them seriously, but you get to an age where it was just more fun to play with them and screw around a bit.
So 12 years ago, when you start to branch out a little bit more and find like-minded people here in Saskatoon, what were your initial impressions of the community here?
It was very welcoming to me. So what happened was I was living in Calgary, and I actually got divorced, and I moved back, and all of the friends that I'd had, I'm still friends with, but they were all still married and had kids and had moved on to different things. And I sort of thought, like, I still hung out with them, but I felt very out of place, and not because of them, but just the way it was. And so I thought, well, what can I do? What can I be involved in that sort of more where I'm at? And so there was a small group of us here at Amazing Stories that would go for wings sometimes or to Fuddruckers, and it became a comic club. It was actually Donnie again that at first invited me out. When I was first divorced, I wasn't doing well. So I would just kind of come in the store, look really quick, and then disappear. But he kind of caught on to that and said, like, hey, do you want to, go for wings sometime? And got me into that group. And it was just awesome to have a place to talk about silly stuff. It was a pretty heavy time in my life, right? So to talk about stuff that didn't really matter, to talk about Star Wars or Batman or whatever, and to find guys that were like, oh, we all love this same stuff. So that's kind of where it all started. And there was conversations around the table like, oh, wouldn't it be fun to have a convention here someday? But you know what it's like? There's a lot of some days, right? Like, yeah, that'd be cool someday. And so what happened was I was managing a Rogers back when video was still a thing, right? And we got into phones and stuff eventually, but our store was too big, so they shut it down. And so I had my severance, and I had to have a surgery. And so there was time at home where I was recovering, and I thought, what can I do with that time? Because I got my bills paid for 6 months, and I just didn't know what to do. And I thought, well, maybe this is the time for that convention. So I gathered a group of 6 names and said, "Do you guys want to do this with me? I'll sort of do most of the work because I have this weird opportunity. But is that something you'd like to do?" And then that's where it all started.
What were when those initial meetings were happening? Was it a combination of like you're excited for this but intimidating, or because expos are big deals? There's a lot of people there.
Normally, that's totally my MO. Is sort of like I worry about all the details. I have to have all my ducks in a row. You know my mom from Sherbrooke. We're very much the same way, where we're just very organized and need to we lay awake at night thinking about every detail. But for some reason, it was like a lightning strike where I was sitting in Calgary listening to Nathan Fillion at their expo, and I just thought, I can do this. And it never, ever entered my mind again that we wouldn't do it. So I don't know where that came from. I searched for it in other areas to sort of get that same sense of just believing in yourself. And we had to fake it till we made it. Like, I'd send out contracts for media guests, and I get responses like, "What is this? Like, you don't even know what you're doing." And so I thought, well, I'm going to learn, right? I have to learn. So found some people, some agents that actually worked with me and taught me. But out of that group of 6, as is always the case, you have to look for the people that are willing to work. So it really truly boiled down to 2 of us out of those 6. So that was Chris and I.
And who's Chris?
So Chris Bernhard is my partner, and he is someone that is very much into original art. And so that was the way I kind of started having conversations with him. Like, he had covers from, I think, Walking Dead #2. Like, he really sees things coming around the curve before they're a big deal. And he's such an eye for art. So that's why I talked to him. I said, like, these art dealers, could we get any of these artists in town? And he was just like all over it. He loved the idea so much. He'd been to Calgary before too in an earlier year, so him and I would just talk for hours, and then we just thought, well, we'll just do it. We'll just see if we can pull it together. And it was all for fun, honestly. It wasn't any sort of a business, or we just wanted to. We were sick of having to go to Alberta or having to go to Ontario for these sorts of things. It seems like Saskatchewan is usually one of the last places to get these things, or we're kind of considered like the black hole of the prairies. And I don't like that. There's so much to offer here, and it's such a great city for like 7 months of the year that I thought like we should have a convention. So that's sort of where it came from, and just to have a place for all the people in the city to come together. And I know that sounds kind of hokey, but I've always been about people and relationships. Like I've done warehouse jobs, I've done driving jobs. I've hated it, and I realized early on that when I was in my 20s that I just needed to be around people. So the volunteers, like it just worked perfectly into what I wanted to accomplish.
When was the first expo, and then how have you seen it grown over the years?
Yeah, so remember you were asking about, like, it's pretty intimidating. Like, if I would have known where it would have gone, I probably wouldn't have done it. Not to say that it's turned out bad, but you just, we kind of took it a day at a time. So the first year was 2013, and it was like Chris and I and about 30 volunteers, and we had, I think, I'm so bad at the numbers. Chris's brain is like a vault. I love it because he remembers every detail. We're a good partnership in that way. But I think it was 2,300 people, something around there. We had Kevin Conroy from Batman, which was like huge for our city, and I actually still think it is. Like, he's a great voice actor. Kim Coates, and then the Smoking Man from X-Files.
William B. Davis.
Yes, yeah, it was awesome. So, like, I was really excited. Like, I just almost couldn't believe that they were coming to our town. I thought, like, this is not going to happen. Like, they've signed the contract, but there's no way it's going to happen. So when they drive to the airport, or they come to the airport, you're like, oh my goodness, they're actually here. But the problem was, people had been following us on social media from their personal accounts that worked for the Toronto Fan Expo and the Montreal Convention, and I think Winnipeg even. And all 3 of them contacted Prairieland and said, we want those guys out. We want those same dates next year. But Prairieland, to their credit, came down on the Sunday during the show and said, you guys, we need to show you this email. You guys have been great to work with. You're local. If you want those dates, you're our first priority. And we said, yes, absolutely, we want those dates. Because I was so mad. We were on such a high from it actually just being pulled off that to know that they were trying to just instantly come in and crush us. At that point, the country was really being chopped up into like different companies claiming stake, sort of. And so I thought, the more Chris and I talked and the more I thought about it, I thought, we can't outspend Toronto. They're just going to come and crush us. And they're known to do that. So I approached Calgary. I loved the way they ran their show. I loved that they still cared about the fans. So I approached them and had a meeting and said, do you guys want to partner? We want to keep it in the West. I know that sounds a bit whatever, but I did. I wanted to keep it local-ish. But the most important thing was that they really cared about the experience for fans. So they took a few, like I think a month to think about it and said, yeah, let's do it. Let's work together. So 2014, 15, 16, and 17 were all with Calgary. So we saw the attendance go from 2,300 to 7,700 to 9,800, and then up to like the Carrie Fisher year, I think was 15,500. So it's just a huge amount of growth, and we never could have. I guess we could have. I shouldn't say that, but they knew how to do that. They'd done that. In Calgary, they'd seen in 10 years at the time, they'd seen a jump from 1,800 people to 100,000. So they knew all those like bumps that you'd hit in the road to that sort of growth. So in 2012, they had a year where the fire marshal shut them down. I don't know if you heard.
I was at that year.
You were.
I was. Yeah.
So did you get locked out, or were you?
I did. I got locked out. I was so grouchy.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Like they didn't. So what actually had happened was the fire marshal or the venue wouldn't give them a capacity because then they'd be on the hook for it. So they sort of just talked around it, and so Calgary thought, well, that won't be an issue. Like we're never going to get that many people. And you. So, what was your experience? Like, were you outside or what happened?
Yeah, we were waiting in line, and I was with a group of friends, and I was with my girlfriend at the time, and I said we got to get there early because that was the year. That TNG was there, Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I said we gotta get there early, and everybody sort of lollygagged, and then So actually the only ever time, so that was a Saturday. The Sunday I used my CBC press pass to get in. That's the only time I've ever used my media pass for evil to get a ticket because I didn't have a ticket for Sunday. So and I really wanted to see it. So, I've never told anyone.
I think that's of all the things that you could use it for. I think that's pretty justified. I mean, it's TNG.
Yeah.
So did you get to meet any of them?
No, I didn't get to. But I still got to see and I'd never been to Calgary's before, and it was huge. But what I love about Saskatoon's is that like Calgary's was great, but it was overwhelming for me. Whereas Saskatoon's, I still feel like there is, and I know it's grown lots, but I feel like there's that tight knit community within it. Do you feel that?
I definitely do, and we've had many comments to that same point, saying like there's just a different vibe here. But I actually even felt that in Calgary, but it's very overwhelming, and mostly because I knew the team. So my goal was I actually wanted to work with them in the office and do both shows. That was sort of my long-term plan because I just loved the team there. There's so many great people, and there was maybe 8 of them, and it was like a family. You know, like after the show, we'd all go to eat and we'd, talk about whatever, and it just was. That's kind of what I wanted. I wanted to sort of belong somewhere, which I know sounds a bit cheesy, but I think that's kind of what we all want in some way, and it really hit that. It was a combination of we all like the same things. Like if you go to the Calgary Expo office, one guy is all Jim Henson and oh my gosh, Studio Ghibli stuff. And then, Kendrick's is all Transformers. He collects like hundreds of Transformers. So it's like, well, this is home to me, right? Like, there's a Hulk bust in the boardroom. Like, it's just that was my thing. So.
I don't think it's corny because when I go to your expo, I see people of all ages, especially young kids too, feeling that sense of belonging, and that's huge.
So do you think, like, because I always wonder about that, if it's sort of, not to get too lofty about it, but if there's almost a spiritual imprint that happens when it comes from leadership, because I think you see that in business all the time. You can sort of tell when a business loves it, especially with restaurants. You can really tell that versus corporate, right? Not that there's not good corporate if the managers are into it and stuff, but I do believe in that a bit that it needs to. That's a big part of leadership, is setting the tone. So with our volunteers, we've had the same volunteers, a lot of them. We probably have about 90 that have come for the last 4 or 5 years, and it really is like a homecoming every year. It's one of my favorite parts is seeing them all and then making it happen together. Like some of them, I say, do you want a year off? Like, do you want to just come as an attendee? They're like, no, this is way more fun. Like to be on the other side of it. And I agree. Like I went to Calgary this year as an attendee, didn't like it. I've always been involved in some way. Like I usually just help with the special events. But just being involved in helping was way, way more up my alley.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What are your And I know we're doing this interview in July right now, and so but it's going to air in September. If people are hopefully listening to this before the expo, what are your expectations? Because you're back on your own now, right?
Yes. Yeah. So. Real quick, what had happened was that same company, oddly enough, in Toronto, Fan Expo, they bought the Calgary shows, and up until about August, we thought that we were part of that deal. But I'd actually taken an exit because I didn't want to be part of it. Chris was still involved, but they told us at the show that we weren't part of the deal. I kind of caught on a bit earlier, but I didn't. You know, you don't know. Business is business. You're not going to push it. And so they said, but the good news is that if you guys want to do it again, you're free to do it. And so absolutely, like it'll be local again. And they were fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but there's just something about it being ours in the city. And I miss a lot of the team anyway too. But I think like the important thing for me is we love that everyone comes that are regulars, but I really want new people to discover it, because when I walked into Calgary in 2010 was my first year, was the Leonard Nimoy year. I kind of had to be convinced to go, because I thought, I like Star Wars, I like Batman, but I don't really need to go to this. Like, what do you even do there? It's sort of my thought, right? I step off the C train and there's like 3 stormtroopers, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm home. This is my deal. Like, this is so me. And I've always gone. Actually, 2012 was the only year I couldn't go, oddly enough, but it was just instant. So I feel like people see the cosplayers, which we love, and it's a big part of the show. It maybe scares them off a bit because they think, do I need to dress up? What is this thing about? So we try to get guests that appeal to people that maybe don't consider it otherwise. So like, for example, Ryan Hurst from Sons of Anarchy, or John Ratzenberger from Cheers. You know, like my parents' friends are coming now because they're like, I want to go see Cliff, you know? So we try to, but we also obviously try to have Star Wars and Star Trek and all that covered as well. But we just want it to be something for everybody. Another event in the city that families can come to. Another focus we have this year that we haven't always had as much, at least, is more experiences at the show. So you pay to get in. We want there to be stuff for families to do without spending extra money, because it's, you know, you can spend money on autographs and photos, and that's always a big part of our show. But if you're bringing a family, we want there to be, like, we're going to, have VR, an escape room, video games. I'm forgetting some, but a whole hall filled with stuff that you can just come and do for free and try out. And, it helps other businesses that want to promote, but it's mostly just people can come and have a fun day and don't feel the need to spend a bunch of money that they can't, right? So especially these days, tight for a lot of people. So we just want to provide as much value as we can. And that's something that it's just a matter of effort on our part. Putting the time in to create the relationships with the businesses and explain the value and just kind of pull it all together.
Do you have you ever had a moment in the last few years where you've thought back to going for wings with the original Amazing Stories crew and think like, wow, this I've come a long way in the last little while?
Yeah, it makes me like incredibly grateful for that group of friends, which most of them I'm still very close with and help with the show or involved as artists or different things like that. But more than anything, the big lesson I learned, and I wish it hadn't taken me this long, I was into my 30s at that point, but I think it's easy to let fear of things hold you back, even if it's fear of finding new friends or fear of rejection. If I hadn't gone to Fuds that first time or wherever we went for wings, I was scared to. I mean, I was freshly divorced, and I felt sort of rejected by my other friends, even though, it wasn't their fault. But I just might just go. Just go, and if it doesn't work, you can just leave, that sort of thing. But I had a lot of anxiety at that point. But just to sort of see what is on the other side of that fear, I just never regret that. And it was a big lesson for me to say, like, just go. If you feel like doing something, just go. You and I went to, not together, but you were at Mr. Rogers, the Won't You Be My Neighbor movie the other day. A friend canceled, and I thought, I don't really want to go by myself, but I thought, I really want to see it. Just go. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, it's weird to go by yourself. I usually enjoy it. But I just don't let that stop me anymore, or at least try not to. If something gives me butterflies, that's usually the stuff that has made a difference in my life and the stuff that I remember. So it's like, well, just see what's on the other side. It doesn't always work out, but at least you know. So, yeah.
I sure appreciate your time today. And good movie, too, wasn't it?
I love that movie. I love that movie. Was there anything that like really stood out to you from that?
Oh, my wife and I went, and by the way, I love going to movies by myself too, because yeah, I do. But it just how exceptional a man Mr. Rogers was, and how if he was around today, he would. I don't know if he could do what he did now, what he did back in the day.
I thought about that a lot, and it sort of bummed me out, and I thought, well, at the very least, I guess I can aspire to that. I don't think anybody can be Mr. Rogers. There was that funny bit a little bit where his son says, what do you do when your dad's basically the second coming of Christ, right? Because it's like, how do you live up to that standard? The thing that really stood out to me, though, was when he, at one point later on in his life, felt that he hadn't made a difference. Remember when they asked him to come back for 9/11, and he said, well, who's going to care? What? So that really hit home with me. It's sort of like, how would he ever think that? But you just never know where someone's at, or I don't know. It just made me think a lot. I'm still kind of processing it, actually, but
Do you feel like you're making a difference here in Saskatoon?
I don't know. I mean, I wake up with that intention, certainly, but I don't know. Alec Baldwin has a fantastic bit. I don't know if you've heard him say this, but him and Jerry Seinfeld are talking about show business. And he's like, so many of us spent so many years sort of sitting in our apartment waiting for like the show business commission, or you could say the talent commission or the dream commission, to knock on your apartment door and go like, your time's up. We've come to, we know that you have talent. It came across our wire and it's time for you to step out into your destiny. And he's like, it sounds so stupid when you actually say it like that, but that's not what happens. You need to actually go out and do something for anything to happen. But I spent years sort of going like, yeah, someday I'll make a documentary. Someday I'll get involved with this or that. And it was like I got to my 30s and 35, and I was like, I'm running out of somedays. This is not going to be forever, right? So it just was, that's sort of where it all came from. So I do wake up with that intention, like I don't have forever. Maybe that's a midlife crisis, I guess. I don't even really know. But I just think it's awesome to wake up and go like, what can we do today? And there's days where you don't. There's days where you have a self-care or like I'm just going to hang out. But overall, that's sort of where I aspire to be, is like no one's going to come and do it for you. Smile, say hello, ask how people are doing, and actually mean it and listen. I think it's pretty simple when you boil it down. It's hard to do some days, but it's sort of a real simple way to live.
Best of luck at Expo this year. I'm volunteering, so I'm super excited for it. So this will be great.
Yeah. No, thanks very much. Thanks for having me. This is really fun.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Mike Fisher. What a beauty of a guy. He is the co-creator of the Saskatchewan Entertainment Expo, which runs this month at Prairieland Park on the 15th and 16th of September. And if you've never been before, it really is worth checking out, as I think you'll have a blast. This has been the inaugural episode of YXE Underground. Thank you so much again for listening. My name is Eric Anderson, and I host and produce the show. And if you know of someone who is doing great things here in Saskatoon, who is flying under the radar, please let me know. You can send me an email, ericandersonyxe@gmail.com. And you can also find YXE Underground on Facebook, Twitter @YXE Underground, and on Instagram, again, @YXE Underground. And there you will see pictures of guests taken by my friend and Saskatoon photographer Janelle Wallace. Janelle is absolutely fantastic to work with, and you can follow her on social media as well. And I want to say thank you to Janelle for all of your hard work. All the music that you've heard on this episode and on all the other episodes that you're going to hear on YXE Underground comes from the talented brain of Andrew Dixon. Andrew is a Saskatoon musician who now calls Los Angeles home, and he's also my cousin. So, Andrew, thank you so much. You've been with this from pretty much day one. So, thank you so much. And you can find him on Instagram @Mr. Mocha. I also want to thank David Hutton, who's the managing editor of CBC Saskatchewan, for allowing me to record my voice here in the CBC Saskatoon studios. David, I really appreciate your support, so thank you. And also a big thank you to my wife, Jennifer Nairn, for all your love and support and patience in getting this off the ground, and to my dog, Fred, for being the best friggin' dog in the world. And before I go, I would like to acknowledge that this interview was recorded on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Metis. My name is Eric Anderson. This has been episode 1 of YXE Underground. You can find more episodes at www.yxeunderground.com or on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcast. Whatever your favorite podcast app is, you will find YXE Underground. YXE Underground is a production of Salthammer Production Company. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk soon, Saskatoon.